Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Canning 101. So this is just the basics to kind of get started with canning and exactly what you need. So to start, we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between water bath canning and pressure canning. So I'm sure you've heard these terms thrown around a little bit and might be wondering exactly what those mean. So water bath canning, it's canning foods in boiling water for a specified amount of time. And they need to be acidic foods. So foods with a pH of 4.6 or lower. And those foods are typically going to be jellies, jams, marmalades, fruits, tomatoes with acidic added, such as lemon juice or vinegar, pickles and relishes. And then pressure canning, on the other hand, is where you heat foods under steam pressure, allowing for a much higher temperature. And these are going to be low acidic foods, such as vegetables, meat, poultry, or meals, which would be a combination of a whole bunch of things, and seafood. So how exactly do we water bath can, and what do we need? So for starters, you need a water bath canner. So let me show you a few examples. I have some things around here. I know you can't see them, but let me grab them and show you. So this is one water bath canner. I want to get myself in the fire. It's specifically for that. And you'll see here. See inside? There is a rack. So your canner should come with some form of a rack. So this rack will be placed inside. And this is what you're going to set your jars on. So as you're placing your jars into your water bath canner, this is what you'll use. So with water bath canning, you need to use a lot of water. And it takes a while to get the water up to a boil because the volume is high. So how do we get started with water bath canning? When you are deciding what you're going to make, you're going to want to follow a recipe. It's extremely important that you do follow the recipes to a T because you need to make sure that you are processing the correct foods for the correct amount of time and the correct volume of the food that you're making. So follow your recipe to a T, and this ensures safe canning practices. This is a highly recommended book. It's the Ball Blue Book, Guide to Preserving. I love this book. As you can see, I have some of my favorites tabbed. Another one is the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. So this has a lot more. Some are a little bit of a repeat between the two, but they do have some differences in them. So you'll find your recipe, and if it calls for water bath canning, remember this is going to be a high acidic food, you are going to follow all of the steps. So to do that, what I always recommend is filling up your water bath canner pretty high up with water and letting that start getting up to a boil while you are filling your jars. So you've already prepared the food. You're getting to the steps when you're ready to start filling your jars. You're gonna already want your water bath canner filled with water on your oven heating so it can get up to a boil, so that once it's up to boil, you can place your jars in and let it get back up to a nice rolling boil. And at that time, that's when you start the time that's required that your recipe calls for. So with our jars, we have several different kinds of jars. Let me grab them here. So you have your half pints, which you commonly will see used for things like jellies and jams, which are perfect for a water bath canner. So this is your lid, and this is your ring. As your water bath canner is on the oven now, the water is starting to heat up, it's getting closer to boiling, and you've prepared and made your jelly, you're gonna be able to start filling these jars while your water bath canner is coming up to that boil. So to fill them, you always want to make sure that you have cleaned and sterilized these and that they are hot. If you're putting hot food into a hot jar, remember that, very important, but your book will guide you through all of that. So don't be scared. As long as you can read, you will be just fine. And I'm very confident that you can. So as you have your hot, clean, sterilized jar, you are now going to fill it. You're going to fill it using a funnel. So this is a funnel. And I have several, okay? Lots of funnels. You don't need this many, but if I'm making several different things at once, instead of having to wash them in between, it's handy to have several. There's different styles as well. So this funnel has a measuring mechanism included on it. I do sometimes just use that, but I normally always am going to be verifying as well with my little bubble stick that also has measurements on it. These measurements, what are we talking about? It's headspace. Your recipe book is going to talk about headspace, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what headspace means in your recipe. So you're gonna wanna read the very beginning of the book that tells you what everything's referring to, but I'll also share with you. So your headspace is how much room is left in your jar according to the recipe. So depending on what it is, will tell you how much space to have to make sure that it's filled to a proper height. That way, when it goes through the preservation process of water bath canning or pressure canning, we'll talk about later, there's not too much space for anything to grow. So each thing has a different headspace, and you measure it using this little guy. So there's different measurements that are etched on here. It's really difficult to see, but you'll measure your headspace. So you filled your jar with your jelly. You take your bubble stick. You're gonna go around it to get out all the bubbles. Okay, that's important. No matter what recipe you're doing, you're always going to want to do that. Now that your bubbles are out and your jelly is in there and you need to fill it to, let's just say it's a 1/2 inch headspace, okay? It's not quite to the line. You would add more of your jelly. Get out all of your bubbles once again by going around the edge and then checking your headspace again. Once that's perfect, you will clean the rim. When you clean the rim, you're gonna use a paper towel with a little bit of vinegar on it. And you're gonna go gently around the rim. That way you've taken everything off of it so it doesn't interfere with the process of your brand new lid going on top and perhaps it's sticky or oily or greasy. That way it doesn't prevent it from not sealing. So you wanna clean it. Once you've cleaned it, you're gonna place on your lid. When your lid is on, you're gonna take your ring and you're gonna screw it until it's finger tight, okay? It's finger tight. Then you're gonna take your jar lifter. That's this guy right here. I have this one, I have this one, I have a few other styles. So you're gonna take your jar lifter, just like that. And then you're going to place it into your water bath canner that's been getting up to a boil. So when you place it in, with water bath canning, you need to make sure that the height of the water is now 1 inch above the top of your jars. So obviously depending on the size of your jars will depend on how much water you need. And of course, the jars will make it naturally increase, right? The weight of them is gonna raise that water level. But if it's not enough, you'll simply need to add more water. Sometimes because I'm not sure if it's gonna raise it enough and I started with boiling enough water in the pot, I'll have another little pot going of boiling water that I can add to it to get it to the perfect height. That way I don't have to add cold water from the sink or just tap hot water and wait longer for it to come back to a boil, so I can start my processing a little bit earlier. So once it's in there and now it comes back to a boil, that's when you're going to start your timer based on the instructions of your recipe. So if it says 35 minutes, it's back to a rolling boil, and you have your top on, you'll now set your timer for 35 minutes. And then once it goes off, you will remove it from the heat gently, and then you will remove your jars. And then you're gonna place your jar, let's say it's this jar. You remove your jar from your water bath canner. You're gonna place it on your countertop on top of usually a kitchen towel, and you will not touch it for the next 24 hours. And what you should hear not long after removing it from your water bath canner is a beautiful ping, and once it pings, you know that it's sealed. And after, as you just heard, I'll try to re-demonstrate. After 24 hours has passed, what you'll do is you'll gently push down on the center of your lid and make sure that it's down. And if it wasn't and you hear this, it didn't seal, and you should refrigerate it immediately or reprocess again. If it has sealed and you press down on it, you're not going to hear anything. But when you're putting a brand new lid on before it goes into the water bath canner, that should be up, so you'll know that it's gone down. So that's a really good way to test it. Once it's sat for 24 hours, you are ready to take your ring off. So you should never store it with your ring on, because that could be a false seal. If for some reason something didn't go well, you'll know if this unsealed. You'll know if something looks off when you go to open it. If it's sealed nice and tight, it's going to be pretty difficult to get off of there. So never store it with your ring on. You'll just want your lid, and then you'll label it appropriately as well. It's important so you know what's in there, and if you'd like, you can put a date as far as when you made it, so if you're just rotating your stock. So I showed you what the half pint looked like. This is a pint to a quart to a half gallon. So there's several different sizes that you'll be canning with, and for different uses. And your book will also tell you how long you should process each size jar and what size jar you should be using, and that headspace that you should have in your jar. So that was one of my water bath canners. Let me show you a different one. Just to show you, there are several different styles and kinds. So this one right here is a granite ware. Once again, there's a rack in there. So this is just another example. You'll follow the same exact process. Okay. So pressure canning. Pressure canning is a little bit more involved, but once again, your blue book from Ball is going to tell you exactly what you need to do as far as following the instructions to pressure can. So let's look at a pressure canner. Okay, so this is a pressure canner. This is a Presto. I believe it's a 16 quart if memory serves. Let me show you. So with this, you're going to see that there's this little vent hole right here. Does not have a gauge. What you use instead is a weight. So this is called a jiggler. It is a weight. So with pressure canning, you use different weights depending on your elevation. So at my elevation, it's a 10-pound weight, which is the most common. So you're going to place that weight on there when you're ready. But before then, let's take a look inside. So this locks. Once again, there's going to be a base. This is for your jars to sit on. Now your water depth, you fill this with 2 inches of water and a splash of vinegar. The vinegar kind of helps make sure that Your jars come out just a little bit clearer looking because depending on what's in your water, it can give it like a cloudy look on the outside of your jar. So if you forget the vinegar, it's okay. Just wipe down your jars in the end if it bothers you, but it doesn't have any impact. But they do recommend that you just do a splash of vinegar in with your 2 inches of water. So similarly, when I'm preparing whatever I am pressure canning, I will set this on the stove top with the water in it and start getting it warm. Sometimes up to a boil, depending on how long it takes for me to fill all of my jars that I'm preparing to go in here. Remember, hot food needs hot jars. Always make sure they're clean and sterile. So you load your jars exactly the same way as you do when you're water bath canning, like I just demonstrated. And then you're going to use your jar lifter and place it in here. So you'll be able to fit a certain amount depending on the size. So your canner should tell you how many it can hold of each size, like pints, half pints, and quarts. That's usually what it will let you know. You will place them all in there. Okay, so it's in there, your water's hot, and once all of them are in there, you will then put your lid back on. I gotta set it down to do that. Okay, so to put your lid on, there's a little arrow on it, at least on the Presto ones, that tell you to line up this arrow with the arrow on the handle. Okay, so you've lined these up. Once you've lined them up, you are ready to twist and lock. Now it's locked, it's on your burner, the water's hot, it's getting hotter. At this point, this is going to vent. Your instructions will tell you that. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna wait till you see steam start rising out of this vent, and you're going to let it vent for 10 minutes. Once the timer's gone off and this is vented for 10 minutes, then you're going to place, if it's a weighted one, your jiggler on. You will then wait. As it builds pressure, this little guy right here, you can see, will pop up. And once it gets to the appropriate pressure, which is this 10 pounds, weight will start jiggling. That's why we call it a jiggle. So it'll have a nice rhythm to it as it jiggles. And once that starts happening and it's got a consistent rhythm, you then set your timer for how long your food needs to pressure can based on your recipe from your Ball Blue Book. Now, once this process does take longer, it's about 90 minutes for a lot of the recipes, depending on what you're making. Once your timer has gone off, you simply will turn off your heat, and I like to carefully pick it up and remove it entirely from the heat to another burner. Just be very gentle. And then you're gonna wait. Very important part. You're gonna wait until it's no longer jiggling, the pressure's come down. Now it's sat for a while, right? It hasn't had any pressure, it's come down, and then you're gonna wait about 10 minutes after this is stopped moving. And the easiest way is with an oven mitt, it's gonna be very hot, to test it, is to just kind of hit this jiggler just a little bit. If you have steam that goes shh out of it, you're not ready yet. Wait longer. Sometimes it can take a little bit longer. Once you know you can hit it and nothing's happening, you're good to remove this. And then open up your pressure canner. And take out your contents using your jar lifter once again and setting them onto a towel on your countertop to be untouched for the next 24 hours. And once again, check them as I described earlier. So this is the basics of pressure canning. I have a few different styles. Let me just show you. All right, so this one is a larger Presto. I'm really fond of my Prestos. It does have a dial, but I don't necessarily utilize that dial. I keep it in check and kind of peek at it. But the beauty of having a jiggler is you can be in another room and still hear this. But with just the dial, you have to constantly be watching it, and that's usually 90 minutes that you're sitting there. So I like the jiggler so I can listen while I'm cleaning up whatever I use to prepare what I'm canning. And you can just keep an eye on the dial. So that is nice that it has both. Another one that I have is a Muromatic, sorry. Its weight is a little bit different. It's also a much smaller one, so I have this one if I'm doing a small batch of items and only want to do, that sun is coming in bright. If I only want to do a few jars. Let's say that my garden only yielded 3 pints of green beans. So that's just the perfect size. It's less water you have to put in there to get going. And so this is a weight that's used for that one. It has 5, 10, 15. So you rotate it depending on what your weight needs to be based on the pressure. So that's just a different style canner, pressure canner, but similar idea. Some other tools that's important to have, show you, is a stock pot. It's just, when you're canning, a lot of times you can be doing large batches of things. So for us, our tomatoes, man, we had like 400 tomatoes, and we were making tomato sauce and salsa. So we had several different pots going, just depending on what you're making. So stainless steel are really helpful for that, to have a stock pot for doing large batches. Speaking of tomatoes, so this old thing is super helpful and handy. This is the Roma food strainer, and this is what we use when we are doing our tomatoes to get a nice puree. We don't have to worry about removing the skins. It does all of that. So you just quarter them, drop them in, squish them down, rotate that handle, and it spits out a very nice puree. So we use this when we are doing our tomatoes. Some other things that we use. So you saw me show you the tools. This is just an example of a utensil set, the ball utensil set. It's got your jar lifter, your funnel, and your bubble remover headspace tool. So that's just something handy to have. A lot of recipes are going to call for some jelly strainers or cheesecloth. So these are also really helpful to have on hand. If you're doing really large batches as well, and you're doing it outside in the propane, like it's summer and it's hot, using, oh my goodness, just trying to open it up for you. Using this heat diffuser is really helpful when it comes to doing it on a propane outdoor heat source, because that can let off a lot of heat. So you can diffuse it and then safely put your pressure canner or your water bath canner on top so that it spreads it out and it doesn't end up warping your canner, because you do not want to warp it. It's not going to heat as evenly anymore. So that's just one extra cool little tool. Another food mill. What guy is this guy? Applesauce, you can do that with the other one, but it's just really handy to have these cool tools to utilize. Thermometer is also a handy thing to have on hand. And then, like I said before, with your jars, you're going to want to make sure that you have new lids. So I like Golden Harvest. I like the Care, or maybe it's Kerr, not sure how that one's pronounced, and Ball. So stocking up on different lids so that you have them ready to go and use them on your jars if they're not brand new jars. When you buy brand new jars, they come with the lids and the rings Rings, you're gonna have tons of them because you're gonna remove them from the items that you've made. So you'll always be able to have rings on hand to use, but your lids will probably be in use with other ones. And once you're using your jars for your second, third, fourth, fifth time, you're going to want new lids on them. So one other thing that I'll share is dry storage. So people see these really cool jar vacuum sealers, and sometimes they're like, hey, can I put my jelly in there and use this vacuum sealer because it's going to remove the air? That's not the same, because you need the heat from the boiling water or the steam from the pressure canner to remove and destroy all those microorganisms. So those need to be done in water bath canning or pressure canning. But these jar vacuum sealers are very handy for dry goods. So let's say you bought a gigantic thing of flour and you want to store it in, let's say this half-gallon jar for later, and you're filling these all up. This is the appropriate thing to use for that, is this jar vacuum sealer right here. Dry goods, flours, sugars, rice, noodles, things of that sort that you just want to store instead of in the box for longer storage. Keep it dry, not moist. That's what that's used for. So this was some of the items that we use when we are canning and preparing meals to bring out to the cabin, or just have on hand here that we do use at home that we harvest from our garden. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments and I will be sure to answer them, and the next video will be me actually demonstrating how we do this. Thanks for joining us.